Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this month's The Elephant We Don't See, a diversity dialogue, a partnership between the Prince George's County Memorial Library System and the Prince George's Human Relations Commission that meets every the last Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. We appreciate your patience. My name is Pam Hamlin, and I'm the Family Literacy Specialist with the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. And our hosts today are Michelle Hamiel, the Chief Operating Officer for Public Services at the Prince George's Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and Kyla Hanington, the Outreach Coordinator for the Prince George's Human Relations Commission. Tonight they will be discussing I Am Woman by Lee Maracle. So thank you again for joining us, and let's get started.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and my apologies for not being on camera. I am having technical difficulties. I believe it's me. I've done all that I can do. I've had everybody turn off Wi-Fi. I am off camera, so I am hoping all is good. Nick is telling me all is good.
It looks good, yep.
I want to let you all know. Okay, good. Just want to let you know that I was not able to finish reading this book, but I have some pretty strong opinions about what I've read so far. So I just wanted to, we're going to do this a little different. It's going to be an interview style. Me and Kyla doing it interview style. That should be interesting. But
I don't think it's going to work out because we'll just end up talking.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. This book was written by this was my take on what I did get to read. This book was written by a passionate woman who's been oppressed because of the color of her skin and her gender. A woman who was abused. She watched women suffer from alcoholism and drug abuse. All of the things that you imagine to keep people shackled happened to these women in this area. And because the women who this happened to were victims of lateral violence, and sometimes they in turn did it to others. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, Kyla. Well, let me finish I wrote a statement, guys. Life for these women were not valued by those who did not look like them, and that disregard was often internalized, as we know systemic racism and sexism so often can be. And what is troubling to me is, you have certain views of other countries, and you believe that things are better. And as I was reading this book, I really felt like racism and oppression is no different anywhere else. And I could feel myself. I read some reviews of the book, and people were saying, well, you had to live in Canada. You really didn't understand what was happening at the time. But I could feel, and maybe these people who had given the reviews were not people of color, but I could feel what this woman experienced. And I wanted a book because we had just read Between the World and Me, and I felt like it was so uplifting. That's what I wanted from this book. And I can tell you, it really put me, and then maybe I had to finish. I just let you all into my world. We had I had a family emergency, so I was not able to finish reading the book. So maybe it's something uplifting, and please help me. I will go back and finish the book, but I was so hoping there's something redeeming. I mean, I was really depressed within the first, I'm going to say, 37 pages of the book. So Kyla, I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, did you live in that area
Yeah,
that the book took place? Because I don't know what part of Canada you're in.
So, well, I mean, so Lee Maracle is a member of the Stolo First Nation, which for people who are not from that area, that's going to be basically the best way I can put it is in the lower mainland of British Columbia. And so that would be like around the Vancouver area. And I mean, it's going to be more specific, but I think for people here, our audience on the East Coast as well, it's good enough, I think, to know that that's the area, you know, the general area in which you're talking. And so it's a lot of the stories that she tells take place in Vancouver. What I think is important with this, like what resonates for me is that this is not a British Columbia story, that this is, and she uses the term Can America, you know, because she's really talking about things that happen in Canada and the United States to women, to Indigenous women, and that those stories are linked, that there may be different, I mean, frankly, subtle differences, but really the impacts of colonialism and sexism and white supremacy, that those are, it's not a uniquely Canadian story at all. It is the story of how Indigenous people in Canada and the United States were historically and continue to be treated by, you know, settler or colonial society. So to answer your question, yes, I am from British Columbia. Sorry, I didn't actually answer your question.
That's all right.
This interview is going great so far.
and so here's, well, I guess I felt like she was telling the story for women she knew. And the only thing that made it a little disjointed for me, I felt like in the beginning she was all over the place. And I don't know, was that intentional?
Is that a question to me? Uh-oh. Michelle?
So, Kyla, you're frozen on my end.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Michelle? Okay, everyone. So we're having a little teeny tiny technical problem, but I'm going to do what I can here and try to just look at the format. Actually, we have Nick here, our friend Nick from the library.
Hi. Well, I'm going to jump in until Michelle's comfortable. So this is, I did not have time to read this book yet either. It's on my list. I've been dealing with some other things, unfortunately, right now. But I think, Kyla, if you could maybe give us a kind of synopsis of like the book itself for the folks who might not have read it, who might be interested in kind of deciding whether or not they want to read it. And that would help us all kind of start from the same spot.
So really what I would say, and I want to address something that Michelle said, which is that it is not a positive book. So I'm not gonna pretend that it is a positive book. That is not what it is. But I experienced it as a call to action in so many ways. And you know, I'm only me. I'm only my white settler, colonizer, Canadian self. I mean, and then that is my only perspective. And yet I imagine that it is incredibly important for people who look like me and also other folks. I think that it resonates. So for instance, okay, I'm not summarizing. I'm terrible at interviews, Nick. I've just found this out.
No, you're fine. It's just us. We're just chatting.
Okay. But really, actually, let me read. So Joy Hardrow, the former poet laureate, she's on the back. She says, "This book is not a book, rather a conversation with your sister, a sister you admire for her fierce intelligence, her hard-fought wisdom, and witty observances of life as a Native woman in these strange times since colonization. Give this book to your sons and daughters, your sisters and brothers, for this lasting testament of struggle and honor will remind them of all the questions they need to ask." And so what it does is it speaks to experience. And in so doing, it opens up questions that I think we can all ask ourselves in what ways have I experienced this, but also in what ways am I contributing to this? And in what ways have I bought into the same system, or continue to buy into a same system, which is a system of oppression, an oppression of women, the oppression of women, and the oppression, and she's talking specifically of Indigenous women. She mentions Black women, and we know that this is something that we live with all the time.
Mm-hmm. Not to interject the male perspective, so forgive that, but for my species, as a cisgendered male, I don't think we necessarily are as open to even encountering these stories of what women go through as much as we should. I think, that's pretty much, that would be a universal truth in some ways, though not everyone would want to acknowledge it. And it feels like even in these moments, like with Women's History Month and with the women's suffrage anniversary that was celebrated for about 3 years, because make those anniversaries last. It's all good. Sometimes it ends up being like at the surface, but there's so much more richness that lies in the individual stories. And I think when we approach these stories, it's hard to kind of approach it with an openness that kind of allows us to be totally open or totally willing to encounter something that is completely different to our own lived experience. And so there was a book that I read recently, and I know this is getting off topic a bit, but Cantoras, which is a novel by Carolina de Robertis, who's a Hispanic author. And the book talks about a community of queer women in the time in, I think it was Uruguay or Paraguay, where there was a revolution, and they were and being queer was not accepted, but there was an underground culture, and they had kind of created this space for themselves in a remote area where they were gathering. And this whole story was just like so far from anything I'd ever read before. And it was hard for me to kind of stick with it until I kind of finally got that I was experiencing something that was really special, at least for my own growth with it. And it sounds like this book might be in that direction for some of us readers, where it's just a completely different perspective that maybe we haven't encountered in our own private reading before. And maybe putting a period on that thought. That was a very long thought. What's your kind of sense of how this book conveys First Nation history and cultural commentary versus how we might be approaching Indigenous heritage in the U.S.? Because the whole kind of the vocabulary is different. There are some similar issues in terms of how society at large acknowledges these people, but in some ways, like as an outsider who's not Canadian, doesn't really know much about the culture, whenever I do go to Canada, at least in the urban metropolises, I feel like there's at least somewhat of a better attempt to kind of acknowledge the heritage, but maybe that's just my own kind of very snippet of an impression.
I think that's true. I mean, that's also what I would say that I've observed. And I think that, one of the things that is really complex for folks, non-Indigenous folks, I think, is recognizing the huge number of nations, the huge number of languages, the many, many, many different cultures. And so one thing that I experience here is sometimes folks will talk about like this is a First Nations tradition, and it's like, which one, or people just randomly using some Indigenous word that like not even from the territory. Like one thing I hear in Greenbelt all the time is people saying aho, which is like not a Piscata, like it's not. I mean, but people, you know what I'm saying? Like people just grabbing onto a word, and it's the the Indigenous word. Anyway. We could talk about that all night. So I think that that's something that, for those of us who are not native to Turtle Island, to if we're curious, and I think we should be, because I mean, certainly I am, a settler descended from colonizers, right? I should be curious. And part of that curiosity is like, who are the people and what are the traditions and what is the history. And so this book is not a history book. So if you, a really, really, really good book, and I was actually looking at my bookshelf because of course I don't necessarily prepare in advance the way that I should. A really good history book, if you're looking for one, is The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King. And it talks about both Canada and the United States in terms of differences. Like, to your question about maybe the differences, this is a really great, I would recommend this book to everybody who's trying to understand like the historical differences between the way First Nations folks were treated by the state in Canada versus the state of the United States. This book is really more about lived experience. It is about, and it wasn't just like, I think it's important to note that it's her experience as a woman. And so there's a whole bunch of this book that talks about what it is to be a woman. And specifically, hi, Michelle. And
hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Am I really here?
You are, and your audio is even in sync with your video.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I am so sorry.
It's not your fault. It's, you know what's I think is going on is that the cable companies are actually cutting our bandwidth significantly. Like I pay for high bandwidth in my house, and signal has just been dreadful for the last couple months.
Okay.
So I'm sure some of the audience is dealing with it.
I knew I should have stayed at work. I knew I did. I'm so sorry.
You're good. You're loud and clear now. How's Gary doing while we're catching up? Hi, Gary.
He's actually not here.
Oh. All good.
We went through a number of iterations. My daughter's boyfriend said for whatever reason the Wi-Fi was turned off, and I can't even figure out what's happening to my hair right now.
See, everyone, we're still dealing with pandemic life, even though we're trying to move past
it. This is the virtual world. So.
Oh, you know what? I left my phone. I'm going to mute myself 1 second.
Well, let me just finish really quick my point about like her experience as a solo woman, and that there are specific things that happen to Indigenous women that are like, very bad, and that this book talks about. And so it is, as to Michelle's point, that it was not a happy story. It's not. And I think that having that recognition, and looking at the ways in which we participate in that, and looking at ways. So one of the things she talks about, and I didn't write down this quote, unfortunately, so I'm going to misquote her. There's not a quote. It's maybe not even a paraphrase, but it is in there. And hopefully, hopefully someone in the chat can correct me when I get it wrong. But she has this part about, not being asked to speak for women's events. So if there's a women, we're going to talk about, women's experience or something, that she is not asked to speak, that she is asked to speak when it's, about Native women or the, the Native perspective. But this idea that what it means to be woman is to be white, is to be a white woman, white European woman. And I would argue that it's bigger than that. They're smaller than that. It's a certain type of white woman. It's got to do with your economic, we're not talking about poor white women, middle class to upper class with a certain education, probably a certain body size. Y'all know what I'm talking about, that becomes a normative. Yeah. So if you are anything other than that, you are abnormal. Yeah. So whether it's your physical appearance or your economics or your, family background, and so she talks about, this kind of, that, this kind of, shines a light on these kind of ways in which we have a normative view, or what I would call the white gaze. And,
one really interesting thought, just to jump in, thinking about our conversation last week with Ed Morales about these similar issues in the Latin community, what you've just described is the very thing he was talking about within Latin culture, where the skin tone and the caste system, that's what defines who has power and who has agency. And it's clearly, it is expressed differently in different cultures. But if we're just thinking about this comparison that you just made of the white women of a certain appearance, of a certain background, a certain socioeconomic status, that is exactly the colorism that happens in the Latin community. And if you are skinny and lighter skinned, of a certain socioeconomic class and of a certain last name. This is a huge thing in El Salvador, and I hope I don't get stricken down for saying it out loud, but there are certain last names that identify you, which is the same thing in the US, the Rockefellers and that kind of thing, except it's such a smaller community, so that the tentacles of those names and those lines of origin are so much more visible in the day-to-day kind of power structure. But yeah, this is and it is very depressing when we kind of step back and think about it in this way. So maybe a new question, and this might be a question for both of you, is like, given that these issues exist, where do you find the glimmers of hope? And like, I just, it feels like it's so easy to just wallow in the abyss of what's bad, and especially since the progress is so often only incremental in terms of when it actually does happen, which even at that is very rare. But thinking about women's rights, and in the Voting and Democracy in Action series, we've been talking about, if we think about, okay, yay, the suffrage vote happened, but when did Black women really get the right to vote? And many of them don't have it now. They had it like in what was the book?
Well, actually, I'm just going to say one thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They didn't get the vote. Sorry. They didn't get the vote. The right to vote was recognized. Gotcha. And language matters.
Yeah.
So women were not given the right to vote. Can I swear here? Ain't nobody give me anything.
Yeah.
My right to vote was recognized. And so I think, and I just want to say that I think that language matters. And so, because how many of us who are women have had some guy come up to us and say we never should have given women the right to vote? Mm-hmm. And so ain't nobody gave anything.
Gotcha.
Anything. But anyway, continue.
Yep. Yeah. Teachable moment. It was not done intentionally.
No. I'm not upset with you.
No, you're fine.
It's language that we use all the time.
Yeah. And this is the point of the
language matters, you know.
Yeah. And so going back to that point of if we think about the laws that are getting passed right now in state legislatures, which is mind-blowing, and not even getting into the voter stuff, like yesterday, trans people in a state were barred from health insurance and health care, and like giving doctors the right to deny people care, which like that's completely opposite to their oath. So there's these crazy things going on, and it feels like we're in a time where we're numb from the things that we've been living through in the past year. We're seeing the George Floyd case on TV blasted everywhere right now, all over again, and learning new things which are more terrible than what we had thought had happened in this place. EMTs trying to stop this and not having any agency in that moment, maybe partially because they were a woman and they were up against a white guy with that. I don't know how we kind of are able to move forward with so many of these things that are on the shoulders of folks. And I know I'm in a position of privilege. It's not about me, but like how I don't know how women have done this. I really cannot tell you. And yeah, I'm at a loss for words about it, because I know that women are women and folks who are non-binary, trans, and other queer groups who don't identify as male. This is a daily struggle, and people like me, we just have no possible understanding of what you go through. And so I certainly appreciate colleagues like you both who are willing to have the conversations with people like me to kind of learn how to be better about it all. But yeah, stop now.
So what I was going to say, Nick, was that one of the questions you asked is how do you essentially get to happy? And there's a question that I've asked in training, and it was Rudy Blanco who asked this question in a meeting that I attended, and his question is, what does it mean to be free? And my response was, for me, freedom, although this is not what he asked, the only way I can feel free is if I hold on to my spiritual, my religious beliefs, because there isn't a day that I am not with, with my family. I feel free. With my closest, most intimate friends, I feel free. But that is probably about it. I am always guarded. I am always wondering, did certain things have a different meaning? Then I have to think, is it my mess? Did I read more into it? You know, so much of even sitting in a meeting for me, it is exhausting because I have to constantly think, was this a dig at me? How do I respond to this? Was this a dig at me as an African American? Is this a dig at me as being a woman? You know, how do I measure up? How do I prove that I am equal? How do I prove that I should be valued? What must I do? How do I sit at the same table? So all of that is going through my mind in my daily work environment. And I'm not saying that I don't have good colleagues. I have wonderful colleagues. We share lots. We vent, we scream, we holler, we laugh, we cry together. But it doesn't stop me from going through those I don't even what you call it because it's just my the way I have to exist. And she actually wrote something that because in I don't know, you may have covered this, so I apologize. There are poems in her chapters and or on pages, but there's one that says hatred. If the state won't kill us, we will have to kill ourselves. It is no longer good etiquette to headhunt savages. We'll just have to do it ourselves. It's not polite to violate squaws. We'll have to find an Indian to oblige us. And that is really what I see. And it's because we are oppressed, it's almost as if we say, you know what, I've got to find someone I can take down. And the only people you may feel like you have power with and over are your own. And so you're, you know, the oppression has made you hate yourself. Some people hate themselves, and that hatred plays out in how you treat others. And if I were not if I did not hold on to my spiritual and my religious beliefs, I would probably, the things that I experience would probably play out differently. And she has several poems that just made me say, you know, when I think about what happens in some inner city areas, that's what I believe is happening. You know, it's I'm going after you because of what I've experienced, and I don't know how to express that. And some of it is due to poverty. And she kind of addresses that in what I've read about, you know, the homelessness and so it was just upsetting to me that there's no different in another country. I wanted it to be, I thought it was going to be lighter. And it was like I was looking for some hope.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so for me, if I look at that question, and I look at this book, and I mean, I have so many quotes in I have amazing handwriting, so let me sure. I mean, this is, okay. So I can't read it, but I took a lot of notes now. So, but you know, one of the things that I think of is for me, there's a lot of aha moments. And so when you talk about hope, and I think, and this is what I was saying, I think, Michelle, you may not have been here for this, but I was saying there's things that really resonate for me as a woman, and then specifically as a white, you know, colonizer that resonate for me. But I believe, I really do, that anybody reading this book would find things that resonate for them, and that one does not need to be a woman, and one does not need to be a white woman or a white person or an indigenous person. And I think that anybody reading this book will have these aha moments. And so one of the examples is, and we talk about this, and for those of you who've been with our diversity dialogue for a while, one of the things that we do is we talk about language and the kind of like, I don't see color kinds of things. So on page 81, she says, why can't we just be people? Why can't we be just people? Do you hear what you say? When did we ever question your right to be considered people? Do you question mine? I know what you think you say. You want me to consider myself not Native, not Cree, not Salish, but a person absent of nationality or racial heritage. all of us just people without difference, you fail to see your own hypocrisy. In the same breath, you pick up a guitar and teach European modern folk songs to all the children. But nowhere do European children learn the folk music of my children or any other nationality. Such sameness amounts to everyone's obliteration but your own. And so it's like those kinds of things that I think, and then this book is layered in that. And on one hand, I think a reader may experience that as like, oh man, that's heavy. And it is, but it's also, what I think is so amazing was because there's so many opportunities for us to be like, have I done that? Ooh, have I even thought about that? I should have thought about that. I can't believe I didn't think about that. Now I'm thinking about it. And I think that whether it's that particular quote, I mean, there's many, 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 but there's places where, I'm aware of, either being thankful that she's written it, because sometimes just like everybody, sometimes I'm like, I don't need that lesson, but other people do. And then there's times where I really appreciate it because, I know myself well enough to know, what, I never even thought about it until I read it. And I mean, that's so I find that hopeful. I find it hopeful because it's through, I have to learn to do and be better. And what is true for me, as I always say, I'm not a very unique person. So I think that's true for everybody. And thanks to people like Lee Maracle and, other wonderful teachers that we have who are willing to kind of bare themselves and put themselves on the page. And she talks in this book about the fact that she didn't, there's so little left of herself that's private because it's all here. And she didn't necessarily, want what comes along with that. But being willing to do that provides all of us an opportunity to either, at times resonate with what's being written and at other times be like, I didn't think about that. And now I'm thinking. And I just think that's a great gift. That gives me hope.
Picking up on that thread, there is such a cost to laying your soul out in the way that Lee has, it sounds like, based on hearing from you, and certainly the way that we heard from Natasha Trethewey back in the fall when she was talking about her family's experience. And you, Kyla, you're a writer, and Michelle, since you've done so many trainings and stuff, like how do people on the creative side and on the educator side cope with putting themselves out there? Because it works for people to do that in terms of the benefit to the others, but I'm sure that there is a cost to the individual.
So for me, it is really freeing when I can tell my truth. And I have never been in a situation where I told my truth and the backlash was unbearable. I have told my truth and it's not made a difference, or I've told my truth and someone thinks they've changed, and and some things will change and some things won't. But for me, it's freeing, and every time I bare my soul, as you said, and allow people to see a glimpse of who I really am. I think that there is a chance that at some point they're going to get it. They're going to get it. I mean, I think, Nick, you and I have had some very honest discussions. And I think that, when we have situations where we can have those honest discussions, it helps both of us. And I've also had some very honest discussions with others in the system, and there have been some aha moments for people. The thing that I worry about the most, I don't worry about me. The thing I worry about the most is people who do not remain open to hear from others, to hear about others' experiences. we have, we're having LGBTQ training right now. And I have several staff members, it's mandatory training, and I have several staff members coming up with reasons why they can't go to the training. And it is disturbing that we are in a profession where we have to help everybody. And the only way you help everybody is to try to get an understanding of everybody so that we can treat everybody with kindness, with understanding that we are all humans and that we all have something. And it's scary for me when I hear that people don't want to learn about differences. And I think that if more people shared their stories, then people may get them a little bit more. And it also, like I said, sets you free, I think.
So our friend Lee Maracle writes about homophobia, specifically around fear or hatred of women who love other women. And so and she relates this as a feminist issue or an issue that affects all women, which is that I'll let her speak for herself. When men talk about love between people of the same sex as abnormal, they are not referring to love at all, but to sex. Since we are speaking about love, we will have to ignore the male viewpoint. When women refer to women who love women as unnatural, what they really mean, and this is pathetic, is that it is almost unheard of, and they agree it is not allowed. Men loving women is almost unheard of. Does its scarceness make it abnormal or unnatural? Any love women can garner for themselves will appear unnatural if women are generally unloved. And so she, is taking this perspective of, women who are hateful, or uncomfortable with women, with female partners. And really that how much of that is, finding love, how are we in a position to deny, love for some? We all want love. But that quote about if what people are talking about is not love but sex, then we can just disregard that point of view because that's not what we're talking about. So Lee Maracle is offering that to you, Michelle, for your future trainings.
Okay.
Go for it. Go ahead. Nope. All yours.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to say again for people who maybe haven't listened to had an opportunity to read the whole thing yet, is that she covers a lot of ground. So she talks about, class. She talks about education. She talks about violence against children and how much, learn. And there was a quote really early on in the book that really resonated with me. Prohibition, sanction, and force, the hallmarks of North America parenting, don't work. Many parents are fooled by model behavior in their children. They are not well behaved. The parents are well trained, vigilant, and likely the children are terrified. But they grow up, and as teenagers, they realize in their new woman and man bodies the limits of parental force. We get old, authority is lost. If a child was well behaved only because she was terrorized, she is apt to become one of the wild teenage problems that keep sociologists, police, parents, and social workers so busy. And so she talks about this and also her own journey, like hitting her children and then realizing that she wasn't going to, she stopped. She's not doing it. And so as a parent, realizing this in my own self, I had to make a decision that I was hit growing up and I had to make a decision I wasn't going to hit my kids, that was unacceptable. And actually I've tried not to yell at them, although I think one of them was watching and she will tell you, I have failed. But to real Finn, I need you to say something in the chat.
She still loves you though.
Yeah. But I think so. My point is that there's things in there for really, I think that are for everybody that give you an opportunity to think, how much am I recreating of a system that came and remains oppressive, and do I want to participate in that? Do I want to be somebody who raises children by fear and terror and violence? No, actually, I don't. So I'm not going to hit my kids. and I have to learn a different way to parent, and it's probably going to be hard, but I'm going to figure it out. And so I think that's just that's just one example, but I think that's all the way through the book, and in terms of class. And one of the things that this has come up, and she talks about this, and we've talked the other day with Ralph Eubanks about Casey Lehman talking about this, and she talks about it too. I'm not writing for white people. Like, you're irrelevant to me, basically, and I'm not here for you. I'm here for my people. And I think about this as a woman sometimes, and I've heard other people say this, like, why are we striving to be CEOs and lawyers? And the rich white man set up the idea of what success meant. And we all buy into that. We keep running to try to achieve this artificial, made up thing that defines success, and try to elbow our ways into this small world. And I think this book is also kind of calling us to question, do we have, what if we don't? What if you don't participate? What if you put your values elsewhere? And so she does a lot about economics and, how participation in the system of trying to, okay, somebody else say it, individualistically. Starts with an I, ends with an istically. That how much that when we buy into individually getting wealth and trying to climb up, we hurt others and we perpetuate the system that's nothing but harmful. And so what if we just stopped? What if we stopped evaluating these things? How could we create a society that was totally different? And I think it's a bit of a call to action, which also, going back to hope, I think that's hopeful.
Well, and then, because one of the notes I have here that was early on, while I said it wasn't as hopeful as I wanted it to be, and that was just coming off of the last book we read, but she has little nuggets in here. And I would say this, I can't remember when this book was written, but I will say it kind of parallels what's happening in the United States right now. And she wrote, "I succeeded on my own. Why can't you?" So I think what a lot of Americans have heard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I know one of the things that I heard in school was, I got mine, you have yours to get. I had teachers say that to me. It says, "I succeeded on my own. Why can't you?" is a dispassionate call to the majority of Native people to forsake one another. The end result is each of us digging our own way out of the hole, filling up the path with dirt as we go. Such things as justice and principles prevent the whole people from becoming dispassionate. Until all of us are free, the few who think they are remain tainted with enslavement. And how many times have we heard recently, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter? And that is exactly what she has said. Essentially, until all of us are free, everyone is enslaved. And I think, like I said, the parallels in the book for what's happening here in the United States now and for many, many years, and what happened there was astonishing to me, just because you just think someplace is better, I think.
Well, I think that is a fiction that has been deliberately fed to people by Canadians. I mean, let's just name it. It's a book written in Canada. There are lots of white Canadians who to this day will say racism doesn't exist in Canada. I have never heard a person of color in Canada say that. But that is if you live in the United States, that if you are under the misapprehension that Canada is somehow better, that is because that is a deliberate mistruth that has been repeated inside our own communities to each other and also outside for hundreds of years. I mean, you haven't been around that long, 1867, but for as long as we've been around. But in a way, to me, that's where I think the book is relevant, is that it is unfortunately universal.
I'm going to throw out a controversial topic without necessarily naming it on the head. But any thoughts on the problems that exist when a woman in a senior position does not stand up for a woman in a junior position who is being ostracized or being, and I'm thinking about the royals. That's the example I'm thinking of, where we have one person who's newer to the family, Meghan Markle, who is speaking her truth. And we don't know the details of it, but we know what she's saying. We know what her husband's saying. We know what some people around her are saying who we trust. Like, we know her circle in the United States. Yet the people who are more senior to her, who are in positions of power, who are women, are not really backing her. And that's not a unique thing to that. I think some people, like, I'm sure there's been a lot of study around this, like when people don't stick up for each other, based on power structures. And sometimes this happens within the same communities too. So, like LGBTQ community, for example, white gay men, privileged, just like white straight men are within the context of the LGBTQ plus community, versus a person of color who is a trans woman. I'm just eager to hear if you have thoughts on that, of when the people who you would expect to stick up for others in their community don't, because of power.
For me, Nick, it's not surprising because it depends on who has the power at the time, and because power changes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to make it, and the people who hold power control if we use it as just looking at the career ladder, if speaking up for someone who's been ostracized, or speaking up for someone who has been oppressed in some way, it's going to possibly damage your career. It's going to possibly look like you have aligned with what some people might say you shouldn't align yourself with them. It's harder to speak up. And so I think what people tend to do is then come to you later on and say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. People tend to come to you like, I can't believe that happened to you. I didn't know what to do. I wish I had the courage to say something. Those are all things that I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think for women, it is harder to stand up for people, especially if you don't know what you're standing up for. Because maybe, and I'm not making an excuse, because maybe their biases kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
The royals, if we just use the royals, their biases kicked in, and so they don't see what she's experiencing, and maybe they don't see it because they don't want to see it, but it would be hard to speak up if you're afraid that you too are going to be ostracized, and what happens to you if you are ostracized. So it's
the system is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The system is powerful,
mm-hmm.
and it it's oppressive and keeps people in line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, just Michelle, what you're saying, like that it can be difficult for people to, especially vulnerable people, and in this case, a woman in power is a vulnerable person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not as vulnerable. Of course, I'm not saying that, but especially if you're talking about Kate, like that you're not, Kate is not the queen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
Right.
like, to make it specific, but I think that we can put this out into our boardrooms, our law firms, our schools, that there is, it's a vulnerable place to be.
Mm-hmm. And because, if we just look at, if it's a woman who holds the power, as a woman, she still has limited power. So you run the risk of losing that power if you stand up for or align yourself with others.
Yeah.
It's ugly.
It is.
It is ugly.
Yeah. And it feels like sometimes, and the blunt truth of it is that when people might make the decision to not stand up in order to preserve their own position, that
Did we lose Nick?
I think we did.
We're getting taken out one by one, everybody. I don't know. I'm up next.
He moved a little bit.
Oh,
am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, cool. I think Chris is on a FaceTime. It wasn't you. No, that was Chris. He's downstairs. So I don't know how much you got, but basically my thought was, it seems like when say you're in a position of leadership and you're a CEO at a company and you've got a VP under you and people are after this VP, and say this both members of the same community, and if that CEO doesn't stand up for that VP about an issue that does really affect their community at large, isn't that CEO making a conscious decision for self-preservation above what might be right in terms of the situation and the morals that are at play? And I don't know if that's really a question. I'm just stating that it stinks, and I think a lot of people are kind of put in the position where self-preservation will win out for them in those moments. And maybe as a whole, we just need to acknowledge that that's what's happening. And I think we sometimes acknowledge that in kind of social situations, but that's a much bigger piece of it than we might openly discuss.
I have had moments, and I'm guessing that I'm not alone on this conversation, where something happened. I'm not a CEO, so it's not with the power dynamic, but I have had situations where something's happened in front of me and I'm like a deer in the headlights. Like like the moment is there, I'm completely frozen. I'm like, what has just happened? The moment continues, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I should have said something. But I have been that person, and I try to be that person less and less, and be much more quick. But I am aware of that experience of the, like, what is this really happening? What is really happening? And so it's that, like, I also want, and I'm not excuse making the royal family, but just kind of to go from there onto this other part about our need to stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters, right? And our need to be kind, and how much I fail at kindness in the moment more often than I wish that I did, because of that moment of panic of, like, is that really happened? Did they really say that? Did I misunderstand? All of those thinking in my brain, and then I've missed the chance to be the person that I say that I want to be.
And for me, I tend to fight battles. Sometimes I don't even have to fight. It's, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. And I'll jump in there and I'll fight a battle. And then realize, well, that was stupid. Why are you fighting this battle? It didn't concern you. It didn't. But I guess I do it because I know what I want people to do for me. And I also know what it's like to not have that kind of support. And I don't want people to ever say, that I was that person who at the end said, oh, I am so sorry that happened to you. Because really, you did feel like punching the person in the eye when you were right there. You saw that thing happening, and obviously you thought it wasn't good and you didn't help me. But I've also had it when I've said, don't apologize, because it may have happened and it was a friend, and I've said, why did you not help me? And they said, because it looked like you were handling it on your own. So but if I had not, because I didn't feel like I was. So Miss Vivian asked a question. Hi, Miss Vivian. I didn't get to speak to you. What did you learn from reading this book? And because I didn't finish it, I just that racism and oppression also leads to, from the little bit that I read, racism and oppression leads to self-hatred and destruction of your own. and that we have to break generational curses, because if you don't, it just continues to perpetuate and it moves way beyond your own families. I also learned that the oppression can very easily turn to hate, not only for yourself, but for those who look like you. And, but with all of that, this lady was resilient, and I didn't finish, but after I just read the piece that I just read, she still feels like it's worth a fight. So I am going to finish this book. But it was, and that was I think I got to maybe page 70 something in the book. So I just, it wasn't uplifting. If you're looking for an uplifting read, this is not it. You have to find the uplifts. I mean, those things that will cause you to feel like there is hope. You will have to participate in a discussion like this.
I want to just right towards the end, she has something I'd like to read. Okay, so this is her voice. I represent the future of women in North America, just as any other woman does. That white woman only want to hear from me as a Native and not as a voice in the women's movement is their loss. Embodied in my truth is the brilliance of hundreds of Native women who faced the worst that can America has to offer and dealt with it. Embodied in my brilliance is a great sea of knowledge that it took to overcome the paralysis of a colonized mind. I did not come to this clearing alone. Hundreds walked alongside me, Black, Asian, and Native women whose tide of knowledge was bestowed upon me are the key to every can American's emancipation. And so I still want to say that I don't think that it is a book that is entirely without hope. That does not mean that it is a cheery read. If you haven't read it yet, let me not lie. It is not a cheery read. But I think anytime I have an opportunity to choose or not choose, it's always a choice. When a pathway opens up before me where I have the opportunity to be a better version of myself, should I try to take it, or should I choose to take it? That is a hopeful moment. And I think, I know we have people in the chat who've been talking, who have read it. And I think, it is a gift that allows all of us that opportunity, no matter our background, to question how much we have participated and continue to participate in these systems. And that's a hopeful thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question, just because you're my two favorite experts? Growing up as women and in learning from the matriarchs in your lives, whether they're blood relatives or other people in your lives, what are the ways that you were taught to break the cycle of oppression based on gender, and what worked in that messaging from your loved ones who came before you, in terms of like learning from their experiences and figuring out how to interpret that for yourself so that you carry those lessons with you? I know that was a heavy question and a big one. Sorry.
Not something I thought about, because I don't know that I ever learned any I was never taught like I was taught about how to, what to expect as an African American. I think for me, the matriarchs, I had some really strong matriarchs, and when I say long livers, and all, I just mentioned this to Monica today, Nick. All of the women in my life were the epitome of ladies. And I never saw them back down from anything. I never saw them face challenges that seemed insurmountable to them. And they never lost their cool. They never lost their ladylikeness. But it was I don't know. It just felt like, I mean, because also my mother always worked. So I didn't have a stay at home mom. And it just felt like she was just this strong lady. And I was going to emulate that. So it wasn't, you know, and she would let you in the nicest way possible. She would give you a piece of her mind. So, I need to think about that. I really do need to. I don't know if I was given any real lessons.
I think so. I want to say two things. So first of all, my upbringing, I was really very fortunate, even though he's not a woman and I'm not answering your question directly. My dad is a very warm, loving person. So I was very fortunate to be raised by, sort of a model of like warm. Oh no! I just saw. No, I was very lucky to be raised by a very warm, loving parent. So I feel like that was a great role model for me as a parent. But the other person that I really, in terms of like systems and like breaking out of a system, I have an aunt who quit drinking maybe like 25 years ago, and for me that was such once somebody in your family does that like opens a pathway that maybe wasn't open before. And so I'm 15 years sober now, and over 15 years sober. And I really look at that gift that my aunt gave to me and now to my children, right? So my kids have no memory of me drinking. They were 2 and 6 when I quit. They have the whole time growing up. They have no experience of that. And I really think that was a gift that my aunt gave by changing, by stepping outside of maybe what other people were doing. And so in terms of like the system of oppression that I think you were talking about, Nick, I don't have an immediate one, but I think I cannot overstate how significant that gift was.
Yeah, it sounds like a real clear model of self-empowerment, and you taking charge of you in a moment rather than allowing the circumstances around to necessarily dictate without knowing the details. But we are as your work family very proud of you, Kyla, and thank you for being willing to share that about your own story, and thank you, Michelle, too, for sharing yours. I think our friend Pam is going to come on and tell us to go have dinner here. There she is. Oh, you're still muted.
Go have dinner. Well, thank you, everybody. That really makes me want to go read the book now, Kyla. So I'll drive over and pick it up. Okay. But I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and to please, we have some copies at the library, and also I think Nick had put in the chat, was that Loyalty Books? I know they have copies as well. And we hope that you will join us tomorrow night at 7 for a discussion of immigration, civil rights, and electoral engagement with human rights attorney Azada Sashahani. And on Thursday, April 1st at 7 p.m., if you could join us for Maryland Libraries Together for Viva Latino, Own Voices, Writers in Conversation with Juan Felipe Herrera, Angie Cruz, Reina Grande, and Julia Alvarez. And anything else anyone wants to say? Thank you, everybody.
I want to thank Nick for jumping in.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah.
Sorry to spoil the party.
No, it was great. Thank you, everybody.
Spoiled the party, Nick.
No.
So those watching at home, these are my 3 favorite library co-workers right here. All on the screen right now with me. I should take a screenshot.
And I think all of us had internet issues when I was off screen. You guys all froze, and I was like, this has never ever happened when I'm in this room.
But it has been a very strange set of days since about Thursday. There's been a lot of weird things going on in the air, a lot of changes happening. Something's got to be going on in the cosmos. So it's time to check in with your spiritual leaders for everyone. But just a reminder, please come back for next month for the Elephant We Don't See Diversity Dialogue, which is on the last Tuesday of the month, which next month is April 27th. And our book next month is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter Woodson. There it is, available through the library and loyalty bookstores. Okay, be well, everyone.
Stay in my office.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, Michelle's going to stay in the office. Very good. Good night, all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.